Hi, do you ever get through like 90% of a painting and then just completely hate it because it's static and boring? Don't scrap it, yeah. Today I'm going to show you how to fix a bad painting and save it from death using 5 really quick and really easy tips. These are changes you can make to any painting really quickly to instantly make them way more interesting and dynamic. You don't need anything fancy, just your tablet, a painting, and a little bit of decision making. I'm not going to be using super complicated, sophisticated brushes today, just a pencil, an ink, and a chalk brush. These probably come with your painting software already, but if they don't, they are in my brush pack, link is down below. As always, please remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Comment below your favorite tip from today, or if there are any other tips that you have that you think might help the rest of us. And without much further ado, grab your boring painting and let's go save its life. So this is an updated version of the inks that you saw earlier this month, and I feel like we're in the ugly stage of this painting, which is completely normal. Every painting has one of these, and I feel like this is the perfect time to share these tips with you, because it is the turning point where we have enough of the painting done that we don't have to worry about the very fundamentals, but we also have loads of room for experimentation. The way I'm gonna do this is show you all of the tips on this base painting alone and not mix up the tips. You can of course mix and match, but you don't have to. So we'll constantly return to this stage of the painting at the start of every tip today. Also, if I sound ill, it's because I am. There is literally no other day I can record this. I tried to put off recording a voiceover thinking my voice would get better, but it got worse. So if I don't record this now, it'll probably get worse tomorrow. So I'm sorry, but please bear with me. But yeah, let's get into the tutorial. My first tip is to create super interesting shapes with a bright direct light. So I started by creating a new overlay layer, grabbing a bright warm orange and a chalk brush and just painting a large flat area of light on one half of her skin and hair. Now, because this is an overlay layer, it will kind of work with the different colors and values on the layers underneath and actually make it look like bright light. Now, you could leave it like this, and I probably would because this painting has enough details, but I also want to show you how you can turn this light into the interesting key element of a piece in case it looks a little too flat. What we're going to do now is create a transparency mask for this layer. You're probably familiar with transparency masks, but it is basically like a reverse masking fluid. So anything you paint black into the mask causes that bit of the layer to disappear, and anything painted white causes it to reappear. And this is a really good non-destructive way to create loads of fun shapes in our light layer without actually affecting the layer itself. So with the same chalk brush, I'm going into the mask and painting out some of the light using black. Since this is a very botanical themed piece, I thought it would be fun to cut out some leafy bits, and now it instantly looks like she's by a window and there are some plants casting shadows on her. This is something that I learned in the Junkie style study a long time ago, and it is to this day the easiest way I've found to add tons of interest and sophistication to your painting with minimal effort. And just to really push the shadowy effect, I also went underneath the light layer and made a new shadow layer and set it to overlay. And here I painted some shadows where the leaves are masked out. That way the light really stood out. I did experiment with adding subsurface scattering, but it just looked like too much. And honestly, this effect works well for loads of pieces, but here, since we already have so many small shapes from the actual pothos leaves, the shadowy ones felt like a bit too much. So let's go ahead and try a different idea. Okay, I've had to cheat on Krita for the moment because it crashes when I try to do this, but let's give this painting a complete makeover using gradient maps. As you can probably tell, I've switched to Photoshop here, and what we're gonna do is use the gradient maps as a filter layer. again working non-destructively. Gradient maps are a tool that I really don't use enough, but they basically take a gradient of colors and apply it to the value scale of your painting. It is a super quick way to get the computer to completely change up your painting, change the colors, or even add color to a grayscale painting. In this scenario, I didn't really like the background, it felt too dull, and I really didn't feel like it complemented the character too well. The beauty of doing this as a filter layer as opposed to directly applying a map to the painted layer is that with the map on its own layer, you can change the gradient at any time, as you can see me do several times over here. I finally settled for a dark red and brown gradient because it really made the lights on her really pop. What I struggled with was the gradients on the character, and the reason I struggled here is because I wasn't sure what I was looking for with her. I felt like throwing in something iridescent and holographic, but it just wasn't a specific enough vision for it to actually work. So you'll see me cycle through loads of gradients and also do loads of blending modes for the map. And in the end, I just painted the layer mask black and gently airbrushed the gradient map in a few places, very subtle. However, I do think the background looks gorgeous, so I actually kept it dark in the painting going forward, but you probably won't see that in this tutorial. This step is a bit of a 2-for-1 because you could use the two halves separately. We're gonna neutralize the colors in the painting and then add a glowy pop of vibrant color. So first we want to neutralize. Now, when most of us think of a neutral palette, we think of warm, earthy, but desaturated tones. However, in my opinion, a neutral palette is just anything that is unremarkable. And just to convince you of this, I'm actually going to go for a navy and green neutral palette. I just did this by adjusting the hue, saturation, and lightness. I really like navy blue and gold together though, so I left the gold layer as is for the background. I had initially considered going grayscale, but it didn't quite work, so instead I decided to take the hair down a few notches and hue shift it. That way it worked a little better with the blue rather than contrasting it entirely. Remember, we're still working on neutralizing the whole thing, i.e. making sure nothing pops too much. I went with like a dirty green for her hair and it actually really works for her. Reminds me of when the blue hair dye wouldn't wash out of my hair entirely. That was a difficult time. Anyway, now that the piece is sufficiently unremarkable, let's go ahead and make something stand out. Since the inspiration for this painting was my plants, which by the way are doing really well despite the sweltering heat, I wanted to pull them further out from the scene. So I made a new overlay layer above the character but underneath the leaves, and this time I grabbed a bright saturated green and an airbrush. We're now going to airbrush a glow that kind of makes the leaves look like they are backlit. I didn't clip this to the character because I wanted it to also illuminate the space between her ribs and hips, and I don't know about you, but that looks really cool to me. And then just to really push the glowiness, I went back to the chalk brush and actually painted areas of direct light on her where the light would hit her face and hair and such. I messed around with the blending mode and lightness and saturation until I liked the outcome, and look how amazing that looks. Man, I wish I had saved a progress shot at this stage. I really like this one in retrospect. This one is something I've seen a lot in popular character art on Pinterest, but it is to create kind of a fluid rim light. Now, this is probably one that doesn't work super well with this piece, but I want to demonstrate it anyway because I promise you'll find some use for it someday. I started by grabbing an ink brush and a white and made a new layer. The idea is to act as if the rim light were a thick liquid pouring down from above. So I started by creating a visible rim light at the uppermost edges of her silhouette, and then as it follows down her hair, it starts to drip in straight lines. The key is to remember how fluids work. So if the shape below is wider and pushes out, you follow the outline of of it. If the shape below is narrower and pulls in, that is where you have a drip due to gravity. So with the majority of her hair, it pushes out as we go further down, but as we then get to the rib cage, the silhouette pulls in into a narrower waist. So that is where we see our first drip. Obviously, this is just a general guide. You can always freehand it as you like. It is art. It is always open to possibilities. Anyway, I did the same thing down the other side of her hair and then also really thickened up the light on that side to give the rim light a bit of directionality. I'd say you could work on the inner edge of the rim light, maybe add some blending and a bit of a glow around it too, but I just wasn't feeling it for this piece in particular. I also really darkened up the background to try and make it pop better, but because of everything already going on in this painting, adding more silhouette details felt like a bit much. But just like the first tip in this video, it is a great way to spice up a flat looking painting. This is probably the most abstract tip that will completely change your entire painting, but it is to create abstract wavy lines that go behind and also over the character. I grabbed an ink brush with a slight weight setting and started to create these waves. The black wasn't looking too hot, so I made them white. I then painted the background a flat black to make sure that the gold bits weren't interfering with these waves. Let me tell you why this is such a genius idea. Number one, you literally start with a flat background and these curves form all the details that you'll need. Secondly, hey, the waves don't have to mean anything at all, they're just random lines, but because you're being mindful of how they interact with the character, they fit into the scene as a cool abstract element. And number three, guess what? Free leading lines. Seriously, these lines lead straight to the character. I like to make sure that there is a good balance of thick, medium, and thin lines, and that the line width varies around the bends and such, so it's all super dynamic. I experimented with adding color to these waves, but honestly, it was just way too much, which, hi, I'm Srish, I do too much by default, it's a bad habit. But we learn our patterns and fix them with practice, so I did eventually ditch all the colors in the waves. Instead, I realized I could actually play with the opacity of them, and oh my gosh, look how good that looks. It's like a lovely haze that adds so much movement to the piece, even though both the character and plant are pretty stationary. I think I'm gonna go with this look for the painting, but there is another week of painting for this baby, so hopefully she'll turn out great. But that's all the tips that I have for you today. See, you don't always have to scrap a painting and start over. Sometimes it helps to just let go of the original vision and let the painting guide you. But in either case, which of these tips do you find most useful? Which of these do you already do? And are there any other tips that you have that can really quickly change your painting and completely turn it around? Let me know in the comments below. And of course, if you enjoyed this video and learned something today, please do remember to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out a ton. Come say hello on Instagram and Discord. I'll leave all of the links down in the description below. And if you enjoyed this video, you'll probably like this one, where I shared a bunch of tips on how I take a basic painting and turn it into this magical holographic piece. So check that out down here. And with all of that said, thank you so much for hanging out with me. I really hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye!